Welcome back, everybody. We're excited this afternoon to have with us, or this morning, it's not afternoon yet, it's been on a long day already, Billy Bain and Daniel Goulet. They're going to share with us a case study on how digitalization aided in rapidly overcoming an unplanned outage at Delek USA. So Billy is the Director of Business Transformation and Turnaround for Delek US Holdings. He has a bachelor's in mechanical engineering and more than 9 years of in-plant work experience in the oil and gas industry, with an emphasis on reliability, maintenance, and turnarounds. After joining Delek US from one of the oil majors in 2016, Billy helped form the corporate support structure within refining in those focus areas and has held positions in 3 major turnarounds, and Delek is joining the team. Today, Billy enjoys using his previous work experience to drive Delek's business transformation to a downstream company with a technology-supported culture and standardized governance and real-time decision-making. Billy recently joined the Mobideo design and deliver process for Delek in the areas of turnaround, shutdown, readiness, and streamlined execution support. Our other speaker today is Daniel Goulet. He's the Director of Customer Success for Mobideo. Daniel is a turnaround expert, having held a series of roles in turnarounds over the last 10 years and managed large teams of engineers located in different facilities. As Director of Customer Success, he shares his turnaround knowledge, insights, expertise, and understanding with customers, enabling them to appreciate how digitalization and automation can fundamentally change STO management and contribute to standardization of the STO market. So without further ado, I'm going to turn the microphone over to Billy and Daniel.
Awesome. Thank you, Kim. Thanks for those kind introductions. Billy, thanks for taking the time to join me today to speak about some of this cool stuff we've been working on. And thanks to everybody in the audience for joining us today. If you got any questions, like Kim said, go ahead and throw them in the comment box there. We'd love to take and have any discussions that we can have as we go through this. So without further ado, let's kind of take it away. So at the start here, I'm going to have Billy kind of tell you a little bit about who Delek is and what the conditions were that led up to this particular unplanned outage. And then I'll kind of give you some background about some data about the actual outage itself and kind of the scope of what they actually took on for this thing. So tell us a little bit about Delek, Billy.
Sure. Good morning, everybody. So Delek operates in the oil and gas industry in the United States. We have 4 refineries, one in Tyler, Texas, one in El Dorado, Arkansas, one in Krotz Springs, Louisiana, and one in Big Spring, Texas. This case study we're going to talk about is from an event that happened in Tyler, Texas, late last year, fourth quarter of last year. We have that refinery. For those who maybe have some knowledge with the industry, we have planned shutdowns and outages we call turnarounds from time to time. We were planning for one that was several months away, but in November, it was the weekend before Thanksgiving week, and we had an unplanned unplanned shutdown, I guess, of one of the major units that ended up bringing the whole site down. So we were in that unplanned operating mode. This was the weekend before Thanksgiving, and we had a mechanical issue that needed to be addressed specifically, but some of our senior leadership did some analysis and elected to use this opportunity not only to address the mechanical failure that happened, but try and turn this into more of an unplanned event and address some risk items that were kind of more broad across the site. So what was a kind of a small emergency maintenance outage became more of an unplanned kind of miniature turnaround. That's kind of the scene set that we found ourselves in the weekend before Thanksgiving.
Yeah, so it sounds like you guys had kind of one thing you needed to address, and you ended up taking that opportunity to address some other high risk issues also. So just to kind of set the scene a little bit about the event, it was. Yeah.
And I think, sorry, Daniel, I think that kind of mentality is not uncommon. We did something similar a couple of times where the employer that I used to work with beyond Delek, it's the old the old adage, don't let a crisis go to waste, kind of mentality. If you've got a rapid deployment list of planned activities, can we get those and take advantage of this unplanned outage and reduce the risk at the site?
So let me give you some numbers around kind of this opportunity Delek took. So it was around 53,000 man hours. That's everything from pre-turnaround activities all the way through shutdown, mechanical windows, startup, and post-turnaround. There's about 44,000 hours in the execution window alone. Like Billy mentioned, this was especially challenging for these guys because it was happening around the week of Thanksgiving. Started the 22nd of November and ended on the 3rd of December. They performed work in 7 different units, from boilers, crude, vacuum, coker, platformer, SCC, and sulfur recovery unit. They had 90 different assets they worked on. It was about 200 work orders and roughly 1,800 tasks. So just so everybody kind of understands kind of this particular opportunity Delek tried to jump on. So the next thing I want to talk about, Billy, is kind of before you started working with a digital system, what would an unplanned outage execution look like? How are you guys actually going through and tackling these problems? And what was your life like before you were able to scale up and use some of these digital tools?
Sure, man. So right off the bat, obviously unplanned outages are not desirable for anybody, let alone on a Thanksgiving weekend. This wouldn't be the first time that I had spent an American holiday at a site helping in something like this. But regardless, what typically happens is what I affectionately call whiteboard management. We find the biggest whiteboard in the plant. It's usually in a central command area or a central operations organization spot. We find the biggest whiteboard in the plant, and we start to manage business from there, either there or something like it, maybe that's digital, like an Excel file or a PowerPoint presentation or something like that. This is a picture of one where we put different organizations or different functions that we have to go through into very distinct and bold buckets. How is the safety aspect of our unplanned outage being managed? Have we had any incidents? Have we had any tool drops? Things like that. You've got an environmental section. You've got a section dedicated to operations, so they can talk about decommissioning the units and energy isolation, and then the mechanical guys, et cetera. And there's a couple of things about the whiteboard. It's visible to everyone. Everyone knows where it's at and kind of knows their role in that management. But there's also a few deficiencies. Maybe before I talk about the deficiencies, let me say this: the whiteboard works. It works. We've successfully come up and down through unplanned outages by using it before. I think one of the messages that I want to drive in this session here is and maybe it's come up in other sessions too, but just because it works, we know nowadays it works is not going to be acceptable anymore. We were doing well in these unplanned outages and it works, but where I think where we were letting ourselves kind of sit still is in the kind of the deficiencies that are shown on the slide here. Number one, we're updating it once, maybe twice a day tops. Does that work? Yeah, it works, but is that good enough? We can't let that be maybe acceptable. A lot of the meetings, a lot of the discussion, a lot of the whiteboard stuff is very much about the past. Here's what we have done. So I've got we're driving a big truck down the road, and this road is unclear because it's an unplanned outage. The windshield is muddy, and I've got a little bitty hole to look out, but my rear view mirror is crystal clear. That's what the whiteboard really provides. And that works. I need to give credit to our SVP of operations, Nithya, for that analogy. We've used it in other areas, but it's one that works here too, I think. The third one, priorities and decisions can get isolated into these sub teams where operations folks have their portion of the whiteboard and their blue highlighter. So they're going to write their things that they think are important here. And the electrical and E&I department writes their things over here. And we have a tendency to get a little isolated without integration of thought. Because you've got these big bold lines on the whiteboard. You stay in your box, Daniel stays in his box, and I stay in mine. And the integration of thought has to come maybe once or twice a day when we're all in the same meeting room together. So I'm not saying everybody does something identical to that, but in the past, I think that's a common theme. You've got static information that is largely looking in the rearview mirror, and if it's integrated, it's having to be done, and it's having to be integrated maybe once or twice a day, using the people who happen to be in the room.
Yeah, that's a great point, Billy, listening to you talk to some of these things. So I think you brought up an important point there is, number one, this way's worked. This way's worked for years. Like it's not a bad way to do things. It's just maybe not the best way. When you try to introduce a digital system, like a lot of these things right here are just become a lot easier. You talk about, the meetings talking about things that were in the past and trying to view that kind of little hole through the windshield. When you've got a digital tool that can kind of bring all these different silos of data together and can help you, look forward to what you need to focus on that day or where you see your potential problems being, you can help navigate that road a little bit easier. So the next thing we're going to kind of jump into and talk about here, Billy, is kind of what does it take to get ready and prepare for all of these things. I know kind of one of the, principles you and I share is that with a lot of this turnaround digitalization efforts, that the standard that they have to pass is, could they be successful in an unplanned outage? Could you rapidly deploy these tools and use them in that situation? So let's talk a little bit about this turnaround specifically, this unplanned outage, how you guys kind of prepared for these things. I know a lot of these things are kind of built on top of foundation and principles that you guys as an organization have, really put a lot of time and effort and focus on, over the last, several years now. So let's talk about a little bit about how you got ready for this particular event. So what did that look like?
Okay, sure, man. I'm going to use the bullets on here to kind of help organize my thoughts anyway. So first of all, establishing a corporate group ownership of the technology setup. And here's what I mean. We have tried in the past to say, look, we want the site to try and own the development of maybe a new technology system, a new tool. And it made a lot of sense because that's where the knowledge is. Ms. Kim said at the beginning, I've got a pretty decent background. I've worked. I'm probably on my 14th or 15th planned and unplanned turnaround, so I kind of get a good sense of what's there. But I'm a corporate guy now. I'm not in the field, so maybe they're the ones that need to build a tool. But there's obviously constraints with that because they're running daily operation. These technology, especially if it's something that's new and innovative to the site, they're trying to run daily operation or plan for a major turnaround, for example, and use the same organization as a laboratory is a challenge. And I think everybody can probably appreciate that, the balance of work that would have to be. You'd have to have a different set of thinking caps for each mode of operation. The second thing, now let me maybe add one thing to that is one of the goals was to when we took it on as ourselves as corporate ownership of the preparation of these tools, we treat it as if we're building something we needed to sell, and not a new initiative that was going to be handed to the sites to execute. And I think that's the right mentality to have. My responsibility and our responsibility with the corporate team who helped. So there's folks like Dave, Daniel, Robert, and the folks from a video side. We had to build something that we had to sell. We had to sell to our brothers and sisters at the refinery. Because of that, we have to keep them as the focus of our thought. Not necessarily what we want to see, but what do they want to see. I'm going to say this. If I say this once, I'm going to say it a dozen times. The partnership with Tyler's refinery, the leadership there, even in the outage organization, was tremendous in that area to be able to help us and give us feedback as we kind of built this product for them. Secondly, not a digitally mature group. So we've got a lot of knowledge around the turnaround side, the mechanical side, what needs to happen, what has to happen in the unplanned outage, on the whiteboard management, like I described. But we had to force ourselves, and it was basically a commitment to, like, we will jump off this deep into the pool and figure out how to swim. This is the way the world is going. And as we build these tools, we need to be able to do it. We need to be able to jump in too. It's pretty cliche to say, I think, but it's necessary. It's necessary to have that kind of mentality. Daniel's got up here about the schedule. I would say not only the schedule, but all the other components around the outage. They highlighted how technology is neutral. Here's what I mean by that. We could, when we put the unplanned outage together, we had, like a lot of you might have, like unplanned. We had job packages ready, or the bones of good job packages ready to go. So we were able to throw them into P6 Primavera to build a schedule relatively quickly. And we had a standard template that the integration between Mobideo and Primavera had to go in. So we throw these schedule activities in, and right out of the gate, the integration between Mobideo and the schedule worked, but there were obvious errors. There were obvious flags in our ability to get ready. We had loaded some plans poorly. We had loaded some plans twice, and some plans we had loaded like 1,000 job steps, and we only needed 20. You could say, and what could be the reaction from that is, well, Mobideo is not working. The technology is not working. The technology is neutral in that standpoint. We can't blame Daniel or Casey or any of Amir's team for that. But what it does do, and this is where I think Mobideo did help us a lot, is it really puts a spotlight on those deficiencies, which are tremendously important in an unplanned outage. I need to know very quickly where I'm off in the schedule, and I think Mobideo's the tool we built really helped to spotlight that. The last thing that I'd say around training, unplanned outage, obviously you can't train. Because you don't have time to go buy folks lunch and set up a classroom and build these PowerPoints that you can push through. So we had not trained all the users. I mean, again, think back to, it's the week of Thanksgiving. A lot of people are offsite. There's very few contractors that are there the weekend before Thanksgiving. So the turnaround, the unplanned outage manager, Josh, he's getting people here, and whoever's here, that's who's here. So whether we had trained them, whether they had seen Mobideo or not before, we didn't get to vote. But we didn't let that deter us in preparation. I'll talk about it a little bit on the next slide. But I think that the training model that we experienced in the unplanned outage was different and was successful. I'll maybe elaborate on it a little more in a minute.
I think one of the most interesting parts of your guys' individual case study here is you guys think very differently compared to a lot of our other customers as far as how you set up the structure of who's going to kind of do the tracking and things like that, who's going to manage the data in the system. I know ahead of time, we've spent a lot of time the last few years working with you guys, really focused on like the change management aspect and how to manage this change successfully and compress the adoption of that change into, kind of the smallest window as possible so that we can execute something like this. So you guys taking the perspective of, hey, the corporate group is going to take and kind of own this piece of the turnaround is, I think, number one, unique in the industry, and number two, I think, pretty smart, because you guys' perspective is let the turnaround management on the site, let them do what they're good at, and that's running the turnaround. What you guys were focused on is, hey, let's track the turnaround for them, help them get the right data, help them send delays and change requests and track status of things all at the right time. And then you guys kind of in your group would then look at that data and show those insights, to that site management who was, driving the kind of day-to-day, hour-to-hour, minute-by-minute turnaround. So at that point, from that perspective, as you guys are, it's almost, you got that assistant next to you who's telling you what to focus on next as that person's kind of going through their day. So I think it allowed you guys to be really successful to, rapidly kind of deploy this type of technology for these unplanned outages where I think a lot of people struggle with it sometimes.
Sure.
So kind of the remainder kind of this presentation here, what we're going to do is we're going to really talk about the benefits that Delek actually got from using the digital tools for this outage. We're going to talk about some of the benefits, and we're actually going to bring up some of the BI at different points that they saw inside of that turnaround, and we can talk about kind of how you guys use those to be successful. So this next slide here, Billy, let's kind of talk about some of these like real big value adds that you guys had that move the needle for you and help you manage this turnaround.
Sure, man. Sure. So first, around modifying work schedules. Again, set your mind on what the unplanned outage is about. The unplanned outage is let's embrace this situation that we don't want to be in on a holiday week. We're going to pour resources in here, and we're not even sure how many we need. But we're going to be calling people. We're going to get them on the phone, and they're all going to be here. And we're working 2 shifts, 12 hours a day, 7 days a week, and we're going to work that group until we get done. We're going to keep full saturated mass until we get done. That's the mentality, and it makes sense because the whiteboard is telling me I've got all these things to get done. It's not really telling me how many people I need to have here. But it's telling me these are the things I got to get done. One of the things that was a benefit was, so we started the weekend before Thanksgiving. That's when the outage began. So we're 7-8 days in, which is the Thanksgiving weekend, Black Friday and et cetera, et cetera. One of the things we were able to do with the integration, so we have an integration between the schedule. What Mobideo helps facilitate is the schedule, our daily progress, and basically our headcount system, so we can in real time see how many people we've got on site. One of the things we were able to do is between myself and a couple of guys, including Josh, the turnaround manager at the site, within about 5 minutes, we had a couple of screens up, and we were able to see the balance of the electrical and instrumentation work we had left had kind of dropped down the priority level because they had taken care of things faster than we anticipated, in an unplanned outage, as best as you can anticipate. They had created some float within their schedule. In a typical unplanned outage, you wouldn't necessarily just send people home for the weekend because no, I need them here because we're in an unplanned outage and we're in kind of chaos mode. We were able to take those two pieces of information, our real-time tracking tool of people and the integration of the schedule, and make a decision to let several of them, over 50% of the E&I workforce we had out there, off for a few days. And with 4 or 5 minutes looking at 2 screens, you're saving 40 grand or so. It's kind of my estimate based on kind of our daily burn rate. 40 grand's not a lot in one sense, but it is in another sense. If you think about the level of effort that it took, we didn't have to spend a day or two combing through a couple of spreadsheets and figuring out information. And by the time we figure it out, the decision point is over. We were able to do it in just, I'm telling you, it was a couple of minutes. And the other beauty of that scenario, I still remember it to this day, was that was not even what we were meeting about. We were meeting about priorities. We were meeting about priorities for the next shift. And just the simple nature of the tool helped it to be easy to find, and it still took a little bit of gray matter between Josh and I to find it, but it was right there in front of us in a meeting that wasn't even about headcount. Second, because we had an unplanned shutdown, we weren't able to stagger the shutdown and bring the units down in sort of in an organized way. So all of a sudden, everything is available. The operations folks who, between Brian and Austin and Cody and that team, had a really tall task in front of them: an unplanned outage and decommissioning the equipment we wanted decommissioned and getting it to us. And you'll be able to kind of see on the S curves here in a minute, but there was a little bit of a lag in that for all the reasons you would expect, because we had an unplanned outage. But because of that, all the equipment fronts started opening at once. So now everything is available to me to work. Which then raises the question, what do I work on first? We don't always know what's important in an unplanned outage. And in my experience, and maybe some of those who are on the phone too, the thing that's the most important in an unplanned outage is the thing that is talked about the loudest in the meeting. That is obviously the most important thing. So one of the things we were able to do quickly with the Mobideo integration with the schedule is find the areas of importance and focus on them to try and maintain schedule integrity, even in an unplanned event. Third, the operations folks, as soon as they hand it back to you, they want to know when they're getting. As soon as they hand it to you, they want to know when they're getting it back. And Tyler Refinery, in particular, well, maybe not particular. There's other refineries like this, but Tyler has a very, let's call it, has a very unique inventory control system we have to maintain. And we need certain units back at a certain time in order to make sure we bring up the units in the right way. And oftentimes, especially in an unplanned outage, when you're doing your whiteboard management, you come in one day and the crude unit's done, ready to go. Well, hold on, I'm not ready for it to be done. It's too bad. It's done. We've crossed off all the things we're supposed to do. Here you go. One of the integration things I was able to do is help us to predict when units were going to be able to be ready, which made the operations folks' life a lot easier. So the transition from mechanical window to startup and on spec went a lot smoother than it could have otherwise. The last thing I'll mention this one quickly around daily cost tracking. Usually, especially in an unplanned outage, daily cost tracking is a bit of an afterthought, or maybe something that's put in place when you're almost done. So we just kind of see the damage of what we've done, right? We had it up and going, not day one, but we had it up and going well before the first half of it was over. And what's important there? Again, it's back to, did we do unplanned outages with daily cost tracking unavailable before? Sure, it worked. But having it available it helps us to make decisions. Helps us to make decisions like the headcount one. Helps us to make decisions around other parts of the company, around how we're spending money. So being able to measure something that, especially on a daily basis, that we couldn't have before, was pretty powerful.
Yeah, you bring up a good point there, Billy. Like a lot of these digital tools, kind of the purpose behind them is to get that important data to the people who can make actionable decisions out of it as quickly as possible before they're going to need it, so they can make the maximum amount of impact. So things like cost and schedule tracking and management, those are the things that if you guys have that data as soon as possible, or have some insight into when there may be a problem potentially coming, that makes all the difference in the world to you guys, to have that information in your hands as quickly as possible.
Sure.
All right, so let's kind of look at some of the BI, some of the reports you guys were actually using, and to try to get a little bit better of a picture and more story kind of around this event.
All right.
All right, so this first one here, this is a pretty standard earn rate graph. This is the orange line here, if you can see it, that was kind of their original baseline. So when they first loaded the schedule, this is what they thought, that they were going to try to execute. The green line is a current plan that takes into things like past productivity, what your resources actually are, all kinds of things like that. So that line kind of changes as time goes on. And then the blue line, that's your actuals. That's actually what's being done out in the field, that somebody is, walking through that job on their application and clicking through tasks and saying that they're done when they're done. So Billy, like you mentioned early, this is a pretty easy spot here to see that you guys kind of started slow down here, and you kind of started slow at this point compared to what that baseline plan you had was.
Right.
And honestly, it took you a little while. Like you started making more and more progress here, getting closer to your plan, but it really wasn't until kind of, that back 2/3 or back half to where you guys kind of really got into your own and actually ended up coming through and, pretty much hitting that baseline schedule that you guys had.
Right.
So you want to talk about a little bit about what that kind of slow start was, and then how you use this data to eventually kind of catch back up?
Yeah, I think I sort of alluded to it before, so I may repeat myself here. The slow start was a lot of opening of work fronts. We had set a schedule with maybe probably unrealistic opening of work fronts. And again, in an unplanned outage, you're putting something together, especially on a weekend before Thanksgiving. It's kind of your best estimate.
Right.
What helped us to get that curve accelerated upward, I think, was the two things really: the preparation for when we knew work fronts were going to be open, preparing for the right priorities to hit first, and using the tool to find those things. And then the second thing I would say is using the multiple updates per day to help adjust, to make sure we didn't say, well, this made it, back to the whiteboard analogy, well, this made it to the top of the whiteboard list, so it's obviously most important. Well, we may come in and say, look, yeah, it is maybe important, but there's a couple of other things that have jumped up that list that need to be attacked as well. So not getting stuck with the static whiteboard saying these are the priorities, but having this fluid opportunity to see and adjust really helped us get up that curve quick. I would say a couple other things, and this is another compliment to the Tyler refinery. The technology also was able to highlight some of their really good leadership and work practices around things like change management, kind of limiting that scope, addressing delays, which we'll talk about here in a second. All those other things that help increase productivity, right? So again, compliments to them for that too.
Yeah, absolutely. So as Billy alluded to, the next thing we're going to talk about is delays. So every outage, planned or unplanned, is going to have delays to it. That's just a part of life, and there's kind of no way around that. But what kind of matters and what makes the difference is how you're managing those delays and how you're responding to those obstacles. So there's two types of delays. There's what we call a minor delay and a major delay. And they have two different purposes and they're kind of handled in different ways. So the first one is a minor delay. A minor delay is, hey, maybe operations was 15 minutes slow getting my permit, wrote for the job I got to do. Things like that, are going to happen. You're not going to reassign resources. You're not going to move heaven and earth to reassign them somewhere else. But permits 15 minutes delayed, you're going to eat a 15-minute delay on that particular job that day. Now, what's valuable in a digital system like this is that you can track those minor delays, see what the trends are, and try to be proactive to figure out how to resolve them. So, for example, if you look at the minor delays for this unplanned outage, 30% of them almost were just confusion around kind of what the job package was saying or asking them to do, or some detail around it. So in that place, it's, hey, we're not going to totally reassign somebody. We're going to sit and have a conversation about what the discrepancy is between how we understand it and how it was written, and close that gap as quickly as you can. So it's valuable to know that information because you can then address looking at the planning packages and what types of delays those were causing. The next type of thing is a major delay. So a major delay is where somebody puts a major delay in the system, and then it signals a notification to a supervisor or a manager or a head of that group. Because when a major delay happens, that's somebody saying this obstacle is significant enough that I need to be reassigned to some other work. So if somebody approaches a delay like that, during their workday, you need them to be redirected to the place where they can drive the work and the effort forward, but you also want them driven to the right place with the right priority. So both of those delays are kind of handled in different ways, and through our BI and our system is kind of how some of those things were tracked. So for example, if you look at major delays for this outage, 30% of them were just additional cleaning required. So whatever that particular cleaning job was, the inspector came by and said, hey, not as clean as I need it to do what this particular inspection I'm trying to carry out is. So they would reassign that work to something else in the plant so that they could get some more work done. So Billy, can you talk about how you guys kind of use these delays? Is there anything you found particularly really valuable during this outage that helped you really move the needle, you think?
Yeah, I'll try to be brief here. I think you said it well. In general, you think unplanned outage environment, it's let's be as efficient as we can. Let's get the work done. Let's knock down barriers. Those are the kind of catchphrases you hear. But I need more than that. Like I need, especially in a unplanned outage, I need clarity. We need clarity. And this helped provide, rather than just say, I went out in the field, Daniel, and the guys are unproductive. All right, let's say it a different way. Let's pull up this graph during a block coordinator check-in meeting. Say, hey guys, look, we've got, for whatever reason, a bunch of common resource delays have come in today. That means with the cranes or vacuum trucks or whatever or slowing us up. Can you all talk about that? That's something that's actionable rather than I've seen guys standing around. So I think this, in summary, the delays, even in an unplanned event, help to provide the next level of clarity that we wouldn't have had maybe in the past.
Absolutely. All right, so next thing we're going to talk a little bit about is inspections management. We won't spend too much time here, but essentially, a lot of these events, kind of how they were managed in the past, kind of with that whiteboard way. Another very common tool was a paper wall chart. And all paper wall chart is, if anybody's unfamiliar, it's essentially just managing the milestones of kind of that inspection process and that work that happens during a turnaround. So these things were usually big, giant paper boards pinned up on a wall somewhere that if you finished a particular, inspection task, you'd go sign your name and say, this task was done by so-and-so at this time. So all this really is here is just a digital version of that. So instead of somebody having to go from the field, leave the field, walk to that inspections board, write that thing down that they completed that task, they're doing it now from either a tablet or their phone, from actually out in the field. So those people are actually spending more time in the field and less time kind of reporting progress back to where everyone's at. And you can see this one was taken kind of towards the end of, on the end of the outage, Billy, where here you can see that, the different types of inspection milestones were done and kind of that last QA phase. There's a couple that you guys had right there that, you kind of were a little late on for whatever reason. So what you guys were doing here is you were clicking here on this to see where, your deficiencies are in this particular milestone. What it does is it then changes the chart down here and down here to show you exactly kind of where those delays are. So you can kind of push through those things as you're managing kind of based off milestones.
Yeah,
So,
I'd say something. Yeah, sorry, man. I'd say something really brief here is a lot of times the different phases of the QA inspection process require like different people, like different sign-offs, et cetera. So this was one tool we could use to help with mass communication. Say, hey guys, we're rolling into the wrap it up phase. We're rolling into the documentation phase. So get your mind right. Don't be surprised when people start showing up saying, can you sign off on here? Do you agree we've done this job, et cetera? So this one was a little psychological, helped us to kind of communicate to the team. This is the mindset you need to start to gather. We're in the buttoning it up phase. And using the tool to show that is really helpful, I think.
Absolutely. So the last kind of graph we're going to show here, and I'll just talk about this one briefly, because I know, Billy, there are other members of your team who probably were a little bit more involved with this than you were.
Yeah.
So this is kind of the real-time cost tracking that was done through different integrations. There's a lot of different ways that this data is collected. Why I think this is even valuable to show is that this data comes from multiple different places and multiple different integrations to actually collect all this information. So for example, we're attached to the gate system and you guys' track system to be able to track the labor costs and contractor equipment and materials coming through the gate every day. And that data is being sent here live. We were attached to the EAM system to track materials coming out of the warehouse. There's an attachment to some actual kind of manual data. So there's some kind of smaller bucket items that somebody would go through and be responsible for on a daily basis to go in and update both what the spend is and kind of what the forecast remaining for that kind of sub-cost bucket item. So here what we have is kind of the real live tracking of what the cost was to the particular date. I mean, kind of like almost you'd look like at a bank statement, pull up and say, hey, this is what I got, this is what I've spent. And then we break it down to four main categories. So equipment cost, labor cost, material cost, and then kind of this bucket that we're calling others. And there's a lot of different kind of sub-elements that are a part of each one of these things that kind of break down and build up to what the whole is. So the other valuable thing about this for you guys is as you're going through and tracking this stuff on a day-to-day basis through all of these different integrations is we're taking those numbers and comparing them to what the estimate you guys created on the front end. So, and we're comparing them broke down on all of these sub-cost element items and as they all roll up into the larger equipment, labor, material, and other buckets. So as you can see here, for an unplanned outage, based off of what you guys estimated that you could do this in, you guys did pretty good here. Like, if you look at it, your equipment was lower, your material was lower, your other budget was lower. You did go slightly over on your actual labor cost, but because you guys were able to look at this data and break it down on a daily basis, I think that helped you kind of control and manage the costs in those other areas so that one where you went a little bit over didn't bite you as much. And you guys ended this outage quite a bit below where you guys were estimating the cost on the front end. So that's really all I wanted to say about this, Billy. I don't know if you have anything else you wanted to bring up here.
I think my 10 seconds, I think you summarized well, Daniel. My 10 seconds would be, unplanned outage cost, especially daily tracking, is sometimes an afterthought or maybe a low flame on the back burner. But this did help us see some of the impacts of some of the decisions we were making, which is helpful. And obviously we had a pretty good result on this side.
Awesome. All right, so let's bring it home, Billy. So kind of the last thing I wanted you to kind of impart your wisdom on this group here is, what are like some of the things that you guys kind of really learned from this, and what are some of kind of things that you're thinking about doing different next time?
Yeah. I know we're hitting the time clock, so I will try to be brief. Wisdom is definitely going to be brief. So, first one. Standardization of core digital competencies. Like we plan to adopt this kind of thing with Mobideo going forward. Standardization to really try to migrate away from the whiteboard management. It's not only in that space, but also in the digital competencies of the folks in the field. Shining a light on bright spots. So, during unplanned outage, particularly, there's everybody's just kind of there so that they can not be there. Let's get this done. And there were opportunities with using the technology to highlight some people, to highlight some processes that were working. And we use the technology to highlight those. Oftentimes, highlights or positives can't be really seen on the whiteboard, but showing some of the highlights like we described here today was important, I think, especially on a holiday week when it's an unplanned event. The training one, number 3, this is what I told you I'd come back to. Infrastructure and the strong use of the tool, the simplicity of the user interface can overcome unconventional training. The training really went like this. I had an iPad, and the folks who were designated to do schedule updating, delay code tracking, CR generation, etc., they came to me, and we did hands-on for 5 to 10 minutes. And what the beauty of the tool is, it's an app, so it's very easy to navigate through the training. What I liked about it, even though it's unconventional, not in the classroom, we have all these questions and answers. I've got a tool, I show them how to use it, and then they can go and immediately use that tool. There was zero lag time between training to do the activity and doing the activity. I don't see us really moving away from that kind of training in this digital space, even for a planned event. I think that we'll try to adopt something similar to that in the future because of the digital nature. I would say it worked for most of the guys and girls who were updating. I would say I told Daniel this kind of jokingly during the week, but if the person who I was training was younger than me, they got it, and it was like, yeah, I got this, no problem. The guy or the girl who was older than me are the ones who maybe came back, say once or twice, to say, is this the right button I'm supposed to click? But either way, the training was conventional. There's no classroom that we had to kind of to navigate through. Last thing, separate event leadership from digital principles enforcement. So the turnaround and the outage management is being done by a group, and then I was there kind of managing and shepherding the technology portion. Especially when the technology is in its infancy, I think that was important for us because you didn't, back to one of the things I said before, you don't want the guy who's responsible for making sure the contractors are here and our materials arriving on time and things like that to also have to turn his attention to something new to him, a digital tool, and is it working, and cloud connectivity and things like that. So having like a deputy, myself, alongside him, helping to shepherd the technology use was really critical to our success. I would say we were skeptical at the beginning, and now they're fully adopting. So that's really where I'm at.
Awesome. Well, thanks a lot, Billy, for taking us through all of that. And thanks for everybody attending here. Kim, I don't know if we've got any questions that we want to take or we want to field, but
so we're actually a little bit over time, and
okay.
because the way the sessions are set up, the next group can't start to set up their slides and stuff until we close this one out. So we learned something new today.
Right.
So we don't have any Q&A right now in the question and answer field, but please, if you've got questions for Billy and Daniel, go ahead and put them in that Q&A section. They can get those and then reach out to you directly to answer the questions, or they can answer them in that Q&A field so that everyone can see them.
Yeah, I'll answer them in the Q&A field as soon as we shut down.
Yeah. Okay, great. Thank you so much, guys. I appreciate you very much.
Thanks.
Sure. Thank you.
Okay, great session. Thank you.